Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We just had a question about the Parsha panels at Temple Beth Am, so I'm going to answer that very quickly before we start Mincha. So, our architect, Steve Raninger, is an artist as well as an architect, and put these beautiful panels on the top of the sanctuary that is on all four sides of this round sanctuary, so the four kind of corners, so to speak. And every parsha is made into this piece of artwork. Larry and I were actually talking at shul today about how we should really explain to people what the artwork is because it's so intricate and it's its own little midrash on the parsha. And so every Shabbat that we are in that space, which hopefully now will be more regular than not, we illuminate the parsha panel so that the panel that is this week's parsha shows up, and you can tell which parsha it is just by walking into the room. So this morning, for example, Pinchas was illuminated, and next week Matot Maseh will be illuminated. So it's very, very beautiful.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I daven in that room since Pesach every single day, except Shabbat, because I don't generally daven there on Shabbat, but I've seen them. But today, for some reason, I was captivated, not just because the one that was lit up, because it was on the other side of the room, I couldn't see it very well. But I was looking at them and I was just overwhelmed by the intricacy and by the detail and the messages and the symbolism on each one, which I did not understand fully. And as I said to Rabbi Schatz, we really need to have a weekly little mini drash on each parsha panel. But if you're in the building, it's well worth spending some time. And I hope that you will publish that book that you talked about.
Yeah, we should really talk to Cheryl about getting that out there. Okay, so we're going to begin with Mincha for this next week's Parsha, which is Parshat Matot Maseh. And we start with Ashrei on page 214 or page 226 or page 558. Ashrei Ashrei Vetecha, Odi Halalu Chasela, Ashrei Ha'am Shekacha Lo, Ashrei Ha'am Shadonai Elohav, Tehillah LeDavid, Aramim Chol HaMelech, Hashem Shalom Aleichem. פותח את ידך ומשביע לך רצון, זקנה וחדך וחדך. תהילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר שמקדשו ללב ועד, ואנחנו נברכיה, מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה, ובא לציון, גואל השם ושבי יעקב, נעמוד אדוני ונזד. ואתה קדוש יושב תהילות ישראל וקרא זה וזה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבא מלך הארץ כבודו מקבלים דין ודין. ותישאני רוח ושמע אחרי קורש גדול ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני יושיע מלך עינינו ויום קראנו ברך עלינו שבר לכבוד דוד לנו מידתנו ויבטחו בחיות שמך כי לא עזבת דרשך אדוני אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה וידיר. So I'm going to read for us from this next week's Parsha. The reading for Mincha and for daily davening this week is just from Parshat Matot, though on Shabbat we read from both Matot and Maseh. This first part of the Parsha, for those of you who attend my class with Rabbi Josh Pernick on the show Srugim, you'll know that we were talking all about the idea of a neder, of a vow. And this part of Parshat Matot is actually all about nidarim, all about vows. So those of you who might have listened to that class or come to that class will have had this now twice this week. And it'll be interesting for you to, this is not what I'm teaching about later on today. So it'll be interesting to follow along if you would like to in the English, just to see what kinds of vows they're talking about here. They tend to be quite sexist. They tend to be against women in terms of their status in the household, so that which women might say or might do and the punishment thereof. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, a sign of the times, not a sign of how we think of vows and think of status of family life today, but just something to keep in mind that the Torah also has difficult things to read, and this is one of them. So if you're in the Eitz Chaim, it's page 941. If you're in just a general Chumash, it is Numbers, Devarim. I actually don't know. Sorry, did I say Devarim? Numbers, Bamidbar. We're almost at Devarim. Chapter 30, and we're going to start on verse 2. So again, that's Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 30, verse 2. And if you're in the Eitz Chaim, it is on page 941. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu mitzotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. וידבר משה אל ראשי המטות לבני ישראל לאמור זה הדבר אשר ציווה אדוני איש כי דור נדר לאדוני או יישבע שבועה לאסור איסר על נפשו לא יאכל דברו ככל היוצא מפיו יעשה ואישה כי תדור נדר לאדוני ועשרה איסר בבית אביה בנעוריה ושמע אביה את נדרה ועשרה אשר עשרה נפשה והחריש לה אביה וקמו כל נדריה וכל איסר אשר עשרה על נפשה יקום ואם הני אביה אותה ביום שמעו כל נדריה ושריה אשר עשרה על נפשה לא יקום ואדוני יסלח לה כי הני אביה אותה ואם היה תהיה לאיש ונדריה עליה או מבטא שפתיה אשר עשרה על נפשה ושמע אישה ביום שמו והחריש לה וקמו נדריה ושריה אשר אסרה על נפשה יקומו ואם ביום שמעו אישה יניע אותה והפר את נדרה אשר עליה ואת מבטא שפתיה אשר אסרה על נפשה ואדוני יסלח לה. Second Aliyah starts with verse 10, still chapter 30. ונדר אלמנה וגרושה כל אשר אסרה על נפשה יקום עליה ואם בית אישה נדרה או אסרה איסר על נפשה בשבועה ושמע האישה והחריש לה לא הני אותה וקמו כל נדריה וכל איסר אשר אסרה על נפשה יקום ואם הפר יפר אותם אישה ביום שמעו כל מוצא שפתיה לנדריה ולאיסר נפשה לא יקום אישה הפרם ואדוני יסלח לה כל נדר וכל שבועת יסר לנו נפש אישה יקימנו ואישה יפרנו ואם החרש יחריש לה אישה מיום אל יום, והקים את כל נדריה, או את כל עשריה אשר עליה, הקים אותם, כי החריש לה ביום שמעו, ואם הפר יפר אותם אחרי שמעו, ונשא את עוונה. אלה החוקים אשר ציווה אדוני את משה בין איש לאשתו, בין האב לביתו, בנעוריה בית אביה. It'll be interesting to see if Rick Muller has anything to say about how repetitive the tropes are of those aliyot. It would be the first aliyah if you're not ready to triennial in its completion. But the repetition of these different nedarim, of these different vows, the trope stays pretty much the same in terms of its phraseology. So it'd be interesting to hear if Rick, who loves to teach us about different trope phrases, would have something to say about those in particular. We'll turn now to the whispered Amidah, which can be found on page 223 or page 234 or page 574. If you have not yet finished your Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We're going to be at the top of page 230 or page 2 47 or page 596. צדקת כסדך לעולם ותורתך אמת וצדקך עליהם מרום אשר עשית גדולות עליהם יחמך. אדם ובהמה תושיע אדוני עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל לתת גדולה יוצר ראשית שלו עשינו יוצר. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Marlise, I know this is the end of your 11 months is Mincha, so I wanted to give you the opportunity if you would like to lead us in Kaddish to do so. We're going to be on, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so we're on page 232 or page 249 or page 600.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divra kirtei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayedachol beit Yisrael v'agala uvizman kariv v'yamru amen.
Amen. Yehei shmei rabbi mevarach le'olam lomei almaya.
Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yithalel v'yithalel v'shemei dekudashah b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'mi ran be'alma v'yamru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Amen. And Marlise, as I mentioned to you earlier in the week, do you want to share anything about your mom? In this week? You don't have to.
Yeah. Just very briefly, and I think my brother may be watching on live stream, not sure, but I just want to say that miss her very much. And even though it's been the 11 months, it doesn't really seem that long. And she was just a very lovely, compassionate, caring person.
Thank you for sharing. I remember meeting with your family in order to be there with you for the funeral and really wishing that I had had the opportunity to know her better. I know I met her once or twice, but really would have loved to have known her and to have been influenced by her even more in my own life. She sounded like a really amazing woman and especially a mother to you and to your brother. And I hope that even in the completion of Kaddish, that you have the ability to find support in her memory and opportunities throughout the different prayer experiences that you and Gary are at regularly to think of her and to bring her to mind, because that's one of the reasons that we say Kaddish, is so that we can have those moments in our prayer experiences to bring the person to mind no matter what. And so now, even though you won't be standing to say Kaddish, I hope that you can find other opportunities to think of her through those different moments. Yehi zichra baruch. May her memory forever be a blessing. We're going to turn now to the teaching that I actually didn't prepare around the memory of Marlise's mom, but I think that the theme will very interestingly connect. And this morning when I introduced the Torah reading, which obviously was not this parsha, I caught myself bringing into last week's parsha, that which I found interesting in this coming week's parsha. So if you were there this morning, you'll also hear some similarities in what I shared this morning as an introduction to Parshat Pinchas. So if you have the source sheet in front of you, great. If not, it's mostly verses, and then we're going to look at a few commentaries, which I'll read out loud. But if you're in a Chumash and you don't have the sheet in front of you, it's Numbers 35, Bamidbar 35, chapter 35, verse 10. And we're going to be talking about these arei miklat, which you've probably heard of before. You might have even heard me teach about them before. I find them fascinating. So every year when we get to them, I find myself teaching about them in some way, shape, or form. But these arei miklat were these cities that were set up so that if someone had killed someone by accident, that they could go to these cities and find refuge. Now, we don't have anything like that in today's day, in terms of believing that if someone were to be killed by accident, that they would have a place to go. And so there's kind of two outcomes in those cases. Either a person lives with the guilt because they're not given a punishment per se, or they have some kind of punishment. Even though it was a mistake, there might be some punishment for their actions. So it's a different idea than this one with these arei miklat. So we're going to just read through the verses first, and then we'll look at some commentaries. But I would love to hear if you have any questions about these verses after we read through them. So again, if you're looking at the source sheet, it's the first page. And if you're not, we're in chapter 35, verse 10. Daber al bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem ki atem ovrim et hayarden arza Canaan. So say to all of the Israelites, to bnei Yisrael, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, ovrim et hayarden, really you cross through the Yarden is really what it's saying, towards Canaan, right? So arza Canaan is directional. So it's telling you that you're going to go towards the land of Canaan. Ve'ikritem lachem arim, arei miklat tihiena lachem. Okay, and you will create for yourselves, you'll provide for yourselves these cities, arei miklat, cities of refuge or cities of safety that will be, and these will be for you, is the Hebrew here. V'nas shama rotzeach makeh nefesh bishgaga. Okay. To which a manslayer who has killed a person unintentionally may go. So just like I explained before, that if a person unintentionally kills somebody, now they have a place that they can go to. V'hayu lachem ha'arim lemiklat. And these cities will be for you for refuge or for safety. I'm purposefully not using only one word for miklat because it can have, it is typically seen as refuge, but when we use it in modern day Hebrew, it's a safe room, a safe place to go. Migoel velo yamut harotzeach ad amdo lifnei ha'ida lemishpat. So that the person who did the killing by accident will not die unless he stood trial before an assembly, right? Before a group of people. So he goes to these cities and he doesn't die unless when he goes before a group of people, they decide that that's the punishment. But when he's in these cities, he's seen as safe and free. Okay, maybe not free, but safe. Ve'he'arim asher titenu, shesh arei miklat tihiena lechem. And there will be for you 6 cities of refuge of safety for you in all. There will be 6 of these. Livnei Yisrael velager velatoshav betocham. So for the people of Israel, for the unknown person, for the stranger, and for the resident alien among you, shesh he'arim ha'ela lemiklat lanus shama kol makeh nefesh bishgaga. So I'm just going to read this whole sentence in English. These 6 cities shall serve Bnei Israel and the resident alien strangers among you for refuge, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there. Shogeg is unintentional. That's the word for unintentional that we're using here. Okay. Any question? I mean, I'm sure you have many questions, but questions that you would like to share or ask about these particular verses 10 through 15. I guess I left out 14. I don't know why, but Mostly 10 through 15. No questions. Yeah, Larry.
Tons of questions, but you left out 14 because it's a digression, because it actually says that 3 of the cities will be in Canaan, which becomes Israel, and then 3 will be on the other side of the Ardennes. And there's a real question: why do you have 3 cities for 2.5 tribes and 3 cities for 9.5 tribes?
Right.
So
Thank you for knowing why I might have left it out. I didn't remember that, but that makes sense. Any other questions about these arei miklat, about these cities of refuge or cities of safety? Yeah, Tybal.
Sorry that I don't remember, but do all 6 become Levitical cities?
Do all 6 become Levitical cities? If I understand the question, the answer is no. Can you expound upon what you mean by that?
Well, because the 12 sons are not the 12 tribes.
Right.
The 12 tribes are 2 grandsons get put in and for Joseph, but then Levi gets pulled out and doesn't get tribal lands. They get cities.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't remember if the cities of refuge and the cities for the Levites were the same thing. But Larry said no.
No, they're not the same thing. That I know for sure. They're not the same thing. But to the first part of your question, I actually don't know. But they're not the same thing. That's for sure. But I'll look into that. I had never put those 2 things together, but they're yeah.
Larry said no. Trusting Larry.
Yeah. I also say no, but but you don't have to trust any of us. Who knows? Joanna.
There's something, and I don't know, like, is it elsewhere in Torah or is it in this passage and we just haven't read enough? But that when the high priest dies, the people get to go, they get to leave the city of refuge and go back to their regular life. Like, where does that come in?
Wow, you guys are really stumping me. I don't. Larry's nodding yes. I'm just gonna go with Larry's gonna teach the class for today. I mean, it makes sense, right? I don't know exactly what you're referring to, or at least I'm not remembering exactly what you're referring to. But it would make sense that similar to when we are under a type of leadership. Hi, Sean and Tom. Maybe Sean knows the answer. That when you're under a certain type of leadership, that once something has ended under that reign, that then the law, or maybe not the law, but the enactment would release, right? Would lift, and so that it makes sense. It's possible that it comes later. Does Rabbi Sean know?
I'm just joining. I'm just focusing.
Rabbi?
Okay.
Me later.
I remember a piece of it from Talmud. There's a section of Talmud about how the mother of the high priest, particularly one who had 7 sons that were high priests, gets all worked up that she's worried that people are going to pray for the death of her son, because that's why what Joanna said, that then there will be all these people, relatives praying, because then their relatives could leave the cities. But I don't remember if that's something rabbinic or if it's Torah.
Okay.
Just that it was rabbinic.
Well, there you go. At least now we have a source for it. Okay, thank goodness this is not the topic that I'm teaching on, because then I'd be very unprepared. So what I want us to look at today is the fact that these arei miklat, it's really unclear. It keeps saying it's for you or it's for them. What does that mean? Who's the you? Who's the them? Why do we need them? Right? As I started off by saying, we 2021 Jews don't use them. So at what point are they not actually for us anymore? But who's the you? Who do these cities need to be for? So if you turn the sheet over, and if you don't have the sheet, I'll just read it. I'll read it out loud. Chizkuni says, they are to calm the fears of the person who killed unintentionally, who worries about becoming the victim of such relatives of the slain person. So very interesting that what Chizkuni seems to believe is that these arei miklat are for the person who unintentionally killed someone, that we know, but not because of their action, but rather because of the family who has now lost somebody who was unintentionally killed, who might try to seek revenge on the person who did the killing, which obviously makes sense, right? That you would be in grief, that you would be angry, that you would try to find the person who did this to your family, and that you would then try to go after that person. So these arei miklat are set up so that the person who unintentionally killed someone has safety, not from the authorities, so to speak, but from the family of the person who died. Yeah, Larry.
As you know, I'm a fan of Chizkuni, but why do we need Chizkuni here in this verse? Because we've already read that from verse 12, and the town shall be an asylum for you from the avenger, that's the go out, and the murderer will not die until he stands before the community for judgment. And it's explained by Alter, but also by others, that in fact this was part of the legal system, that it was the responsibility of the avenger in this case, if it had been an intentional murder, to take out the punishment. And supposedly, according to Alter, this comes from the line from Bereshit, he who sheds human blood, by humans his blood shall be shed. I don't know if that's what what ends up being the legal mandate, but it appears that the legal system was, if you murder somebody, first your avenger from the family of the murdered person kills that person. But if not, then there is a judgment by the community, and if it's deemed to be capital punishment, then they carry out the crime. So it seems to me Chizkuni hasn't really helped us here. He hasn't really added anything.
So okay, Joanna first.
There's a component in Arab culture where revenge can go on for generations, right? And families, if something happened to one family, let's, envision this, a killing, that, generations later, that dispute is remembered. And, let's say the family of the killer, like, I've read accounts of lives in fear 2-3 generations later, over the possible revenge that the family might seek. So it's interesting in that concept to consider this, because this seems to want to put a stop to that kind of thing.
Yes, I agree that's what Chizkuni's trying to do here, but also what the arei miklat are doing here, right? That they're trying to make it such that revenge piece the family wouldn't feel as though they have to take that upon themselves, but rather that it might be something that comes to the person from the authorities or from this Eidah that comes together to give them their ruling based on the crime. To go back to Larry for a moment, and I think it actually connects to what Joanna just said, I think that there is something that Chizkuni is adding here in terms of bringing to us the family of the victim. We don't think, when we're talking about these arei miklat, we don't think of the person who's been killed. We're just thinking about the person who did the killing, right? The arei miklat are set up for us so that if we unintentionally kill somebody, we have a place to go. But we're not thinking about how the family must feel of the person who's the victim of this killing. So I think that what Chizkuni is doing here is bringing in that other side. He's not telling us how to care for them, right? He doesn't go that far, but he does bring to our consciousness there's another party involved here. It's not just the person who did the killing. It's also the family who's fallen victim to this person who's now going to have safety because these arei miklat were set up for us. Was there a Fieldsmeyer hand? Was there a hand that I saw?
Yeah, I wasn't seeing the Chizkuni comment that way.
Oh, great.
I was seeing it and again, Larry might have already said something along these lines, but I was just looking at the verse 12,
Yeah.
And it seems to be saying that the purpose is to keep the guy alive, the unintentional killer, so that that person can have a so that justice can be handled appropriately. But it seems like Chizkun is talking about his, like, the killer's state of mind, actually, which isn't explicit in the text. And maybe this was said and I just didn't.
No, it wasn't said, and I totally agree. And I think that you're picking up on the we read in English, so the calming of the fears, right? That the person who did the killing can now feel as though they have a place to go where they will be taken care of and don't have to worry that the family is going to come after them or someone's going to come after them and kill them based on the action that they did. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that for the first time, we are also aware that that fear is coming because it's not just, again, like the authorities or this Ada, whoever it was back in those days, but that it also, as Joanna pointed out, it also was the way of the family on the other side to want to hurt the person. And again, maybe rightfully so, but that now the person who did the killing can feel as though they have a place where they'll remain safe and not hunted, for better or for worse, but they will remain safe. Any other hands before we go to the next commentary? Okay. So the next commentary is Shadal, and it's on the same verse, actually. I'm going to read it in chunks. If you have this source sheet in front of you, you'll be able to see where I stop, and if not, just stay with me. So, just trying to see where I want to start here. Okay, I'll start again. So before people were organized under a king or ministers or judges and officers, every family took revenge against other families, and the closest relative of the dead was responsible to avenge his death. So similar to what Joanna actually was bringing to us earlier. The Torah established judges and officers and transferred the responsibilities of avenging a killing from individuals to the community. Now, in a case of murder, it was possible to mollify the avenger by telling him to leave it to the judges to investigate and to execute the killer if found guilty of murder. However, when the killing was unintentional, it was impossible to mollify the avenger and oblige him to watch he who killed his father or brother remain unpunished. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Any questions about that or any comments? Okay. He and his acquaintances would interpret his inaction, to be proof that he does not love his father or brother, since he does not avenge their death. Right? So that you might think, oh, if you're not going to go try to find this guy who hurt our family member, well, then you must not care about our family member very much, because shouldn't you be angry and shouldn't you want to go and get them? They did this terrible thing. Now, it was impossible to totally uproot this attitude that lack of vengeance implied lack of love. The divine wisdom knew that condemning the avenger to death when avenging an unintentional killing would not prevent all or even most of the avengers from avenging the death of their relatives. So, what did the Torah do? It left the avenger the right to avenge the killing of his kin, but designated places of refuge where the unintentional killer could seek protection and in which the avenger is unable to kill him. Okay. What, Larry, you're smiling. Do you have a thought on this?
I do. I hate to dominate, but I read this before. Just tell me first, who is Shadal?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I didn't write it down, and I don't remember what Shadal stands for. It might come to me, but I'm not remembering in this moment. Oh, Joanna knows.
David Luzzatto.
But what's the shin?
I don't know. Let me think about that one.
What's the time period?
Italy, I forget exactly when. A very rough guess, 1400s, but that's really rough and I could be wrong on that.
So first of all, but as an aside, because I don't want to dwell on this,
Yeah.
I think that what he's describing here in terms of letting the courts decide is kind of a later development,
Yeah.
a Mishnaic and Talmudic development.
Right.
But I'm blown away by this. And I'm blown away because I'm thinking of contemporary issues. And I'm thinking about the way in which communities feel when someone is killed. And then there's this big question and debate about whether it was justified or not. And obviously I'm talking about police killings. And when it's determined that it was, quote, unintentional, manslaughter, or not even manslaughter, but justifiable, that anger remains. And that's what this is describing here, right here. That anger remains. You can't assuage that anger by saying, but it was unintentional, and therefore it is not a capital case. And so Shadal is recognizing or saying that the Torah is recognizing along the lines of what Joanna was talking about in terms of Arab culture, but not only that, I don't want to focus on Arab culture, that it's really hard for people to, I'll say, act dispassionately, not rationally, act dispassionately, even when they might favor the application of that very same principle if the situation were reversed. So it's both deep and, as I said, it gives an insight into what's happening today in our own societies.
Yeah. Marizon, did you want to say something?
No, it's on Shadal.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I found out it's Samuel David Losato.
Samuel, thank you. I know
Yeah, and
she's showing her.
was born 1800 and died 1865 in Italy.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments before I respond to Larry? Okay. Yeah, I think that this is, to me, this piece, when I read this, I didn't actually connect it so much to what was going on today, though I think it's a very powerful read to be able to connect it to everything that we're seeing in today's world. I thought of it mostly around the fact that even if these arei miklat exist, that experience of grief and that experience of anger and that guilt, right, that the person who unintentionally does the killing ends up living with is very deep. And that doesn't go away. And so I wonder if what the Torah was trying to do in creating these arei miklat is at least say, if we cannot get rid of those feelings, of those deep feelings, like what Rabbi Sean was saying before, those deep feelings of you might be scared, you might worry, you might think that something terrible is going to happen to you for good reason, that we're going to create these arei miklat so that at least we can tell you have a place to go. At least you don't have to worry about a place to go. That you might still live with that guilt and that anger and that fear for the rest of your life, whether you are the victim's family or the person who did the killing. But that at least we can provide you some place where you know that you will be, again, I'm using the word safe, though I'm not even sure that safe is the right term, but at least safe from the harm that could be caused by the family of the victim to you. Any other comments or thoughts or questions before I close this out? No? Okay. So what I wanted to leave you with, because there's so much more to say about these arei miklat and much, much more to go into. First of all, if you continue reading in the Parsha, but also just in general, commentators go on and on and on about what they were for and how they helped and who was in them and all the rest of it. And as we were hearing before, the Talmud also speaks to them. And the one piece that I started off talking about at the beginning of this teaching is that for me, the way that you can look at these different cities, not just for the person who goes into them, but for the community that is dealing with the grief, is dealing with the death, is dealing with that anger, these are also somewhat safe cities, right? So just go with me for a second. If a person kills, God forbid, your uncle, and you are now enraged because it was unintentional, they're not going to get the punishment that you believe in your heart they should receive, and they're going to go into this city of refuge where you cannot touch them. You then are also not going to do anything that would cause your family harm, because you're not going to kill someone or you're not going to hurt someone else. Yes, you're going to live with the grief and you're going to live with the anger, but these cities of refuge seem to be a safe haven, both for the person who caused the crime and also for the family who's grieving. And I think that that's a very interesting way of thinking about these cities of refuge, because we focus so much on the people inside, but not how it's affecting the people on the outside who have dealt with whatever death in their family they're dealing with. So I know this was a little bit of a different route into these cities of refuge than at least I've ever taken before, but I was compelled by specifically Chizkuni and Shadal in bringing us to those areas of thinking through these cities of refuge. So I hope that you can think about them in this way. Again, you'll hear more about them, I'm sure, throughout the week, because they are a very interesting part of this parsha. But to think about how they are cities of refuge, both on the inside and also for those on the outside. We will continue with Mariv on a page. Give me 1 second. On page, well, I just found Havdalah, so it can't be too far off. Okay, page 264 or page 281 or page 200. And we will begin right before the Baruch Hu and then conclude with the blessing following the Baruch Hu, but skipping it. Vehu rachum yechaper avon velo yashchit vehir shiva po velo yikol chamato Adonai Hoshia hamelech ya'aninu v'yom korenu Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'cholam asher b'baro mariv arvim v'chol Uma'avir yom u'mevi laila mavdil ben yom u'vein laila Adonai tzvaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamidim l'chaleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim ahavat olam beit Yisrael amachat Torah v'tzachum ve'ahavatecha tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael el melech ne'eman Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem meretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem emet, v'menach lo kayam aleinu kin. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה בני ישראל לכהנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך בעלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות עושה פלא מלכותך ראו בניך בוקר היום לפני משה זה אלי אנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל, השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום ואמתנו מלכנו לכם ופסקנו. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. ברוך אדוני לעולם אמן ברוך אדוני בציון שכן ירושלים הללויה. כי המלכות שלך היא ולעולם לעד תמלך בכבוד כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו. The whispered Amidah can be found on page 270 or page 286 or page 210. If you've not yet finished your Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We're at the bottom, page 279. Vihinam Adonai Eloheinu aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu konena aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu konenehu yoshev besetel yom esashalai shalom. Yikra'eni v'nei imanochi b'sarach alatzeu v'achvadei orchem im asviyu v'arehu v'shuhati orchem im asviyu v'arehu v'shuhati Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adonai kol latet kedula liyatzer b'reshit shelo asanu kigoei haaretz v'lo samani kishon v'anachnu korhim u'mishtachavim u'adim lifnei melech melchim lechem hakadosh baruch hu shemash. Kakatu b'toratech Adonai himlach le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech ala kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Mourner's Kaddish. Page 282, page 298, or page 698. Yit gadal ve'yit kadash shemei rabba be'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'biyomechon u'b'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kari ve'imru amen yehei shemei rabba mevorach le'olam lomei almaya Yit barach, v'yishtabach, v'yit pa'ar, v'yit romam, v'yit naseh, v'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shemei d'kudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom arab amin shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. We're just a few minutes before Havdalah, 2 to be exact. So I'm just going to get my stuff ready, but maybe I'll do some announcements while I'm getting this ready, because why not? Next.
Rebecca, Rabbi,
Yes.
I just wanted to say one idea that I had, but you were
right.
you were wrapping up so beautifully. But hi everybody, good to see you all. I did just want to say that I think it would be so interesting, and I wonder if some scholars have done this, to do some kind of comparison of the cities of refuge with the notion of restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
Was that also brought up and I didn't hear it?
Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't. I mean, Larry brought up the idea of more of this kind of restorative justice needed in our world today, but it wasn't brought up as a comparison.
I just think restorative justice is a topic which is getting a lot of coverage right now, and really interesting scholarly articles and popular articles about it. And I do think it would be a fascinating thing for someone to do, to connect or not, either the text itself or some of the Meforshim, the commentaries that we were looking at today. That's all. I just wanted to, see, I used one of your minutes.
No, great. It's a great.
I don't know if this is, I believe it's connected to this idea that in Arab culture, there arose the idea of a solcha, which I believe is from the same shorash as our word slicha, forgiveness, as a method of bringing restorative justice. So particularly sort of within that Mediterranean Eastern culture, to what you were just saying.
Oh, interesting. Tybal, you
Right.
seem to...
I remembered something else, which is, I think that in the Talmud, and I still don't remember which tractate, the mother of the high priest had to give either clothing or food or something to the people taking, or not had to give, was inspired to give or something to the people taking the refuge, because that way they would pray, because the mother of that particular high priest was treating them so well that then they wouldn't want the high priest to die.
Fascinating. I have definitely never studied that, or if I have, I don't remember. But it's a fascinating story that you keep on remembering pieces of. So thank you.
And if we still have a minute, if it's okay to ask Marlies how it felt, because didn't you just have mourners that you didn't say?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was the first time. It's very different. Say that. Thank you.
Okay. We are going to do Havdalah next week. What I started to say was next week, Shabbat morning, again, we will be in the sanctuary. For those of you who can join us, this morning was really, really beautiful and very fun. And next week will be just as fun and hopefully just as beautiful. So that's Shabbat morning. And Friday night, we're having Shabbat Sovev. So it's a whole weekend of lots of song. If you can be at any or all of that, we would love to have you. All right. הנה אל ישועתי, אפתח ולא אפחד, כי עוזי וזמרתי אדוני, ויהי לי לישועה, ושפתי מים בששון, ממעייני הישועה, לאדוני הישועה. עמך ברכתך סלע, אדוני צבאות עמנו, משגב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלע, אדוני צבאות, אשרי אדם בוטח בך, אדוני הושיע, המלך יעננו ויום קורנו ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר כן תהיה לנו כוס ישועות תשא ובשם אדוני אקרא יין עיני יין עיני עיני Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei vesamim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei merei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'amim ben yom hashvi'i le'sheshet yamei hamaseh. Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. Chatoteinu yimcho. Zareinu v'chaspeinu yarbe yarbe kachol v'kachavim b'ala. Zareinu v'chaspeinu yarbe yarbe kachol v'kachavim b'ala. Shavua tov, 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 Shavua tov. Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu agiladi, bimhera ve'yameinu, Yavo Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David. Shavua Tov, everyone. Lovely learning and davening with you this evening. And have a very safe and fun 4th of July. I will see you soon.